everybody. I think I'll get started with the welcomes and the hellos. So good evening and welcome to Love Books. Lovely, as always, to have all of you here tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. I think we've lost a few people due to the rain, but wonderful that you have come out. And welcome, of course, to the launch of Malika Ndlovu's Griefseed. Griefseed is an exquisite and profound collection of very beautiful essays, poetry, images, and reflections on grief. Every single one of us has or will at some stage of our lives experience grief. And when grief is with you, there is nothing more necessary or comforting, I don't think, than turning to the writings of others. So thank you, Malika, and congratulations on this incredibly special publication. I'd like to also just mention and congratulate Karina Shurik of Caravan Press, who is Malika's publisher. She's not here tonight. She's in Cape Town, but she's a sort of a one-man band down in Cape Town, and she's publishing some of the best stuff that's coming out of South Africa at the moment. So nice place to be, Malika. You want to give her a clap? Trying to introduce Malika in a paragraph is almost impossible, so please do go and read up about all the incredible work that she does. But for the purposes of this evening, she's an internationally published South African poet, playwright, performer, and arts project manager. She initiates, drives, and collaborates on a range of arts and culture-based projects linked to social healing and transformation, education, and heritage. She has written 5 poetry collections and 2 plays. Welcome. Chatting to Malika this evening is the equally magnificent Makhosazana Xaba. I'm sorry, Makhosazana. She is Associate Professor of Practice at UJ's Center for the Study of Race, Gender and Class. She's the author of 4 poetry collections and the editor of 2 anthologies, and her latest work is Izimpabanga Zomhlaba, a translation into isiZulu of Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you for braving the cold and the rain so we could celebrate Malika. Welcome everybody. There's family here.
Yes. Yes.
Lovely to have family.
Eternal Aunt Grace, my mother Cecilia Anastasia Dunn, my Aunt Marlene. Lots of blood in the house.
Welcome, family. There are lots of book lovers here.
Yes.
And there are poetry lovers here. Welcome, everybody. So I thought, Malika, we could start with you reading from page 60, the last section of that long poem called Body Conversations, because I'm just looking at these bodies and thinking, let's hear you talk about these bodies.
Skin listens, breath sings, blood cools, belly waits, nose craves, mouth yearns, back arcs, legs fold, tongue sleeps, lips remember, eyes blur. Heart swells. Mind quells.
Right? So I remember being very struck when I read what you wrote at the back of Griefseed, when you said that the poem came to you in a dream. The title of the poem came to you in a dream. Can you talk a bit about that?
This is the magical journey. This is a book, but I keep saying it's a book, but it's not a book. I think of it as a bag of seeds. I think the seeds have been landing in my life for about 3 decades. So some of the seeds in here are quite old, and I've been waiting to find the right soil, which is the right time, and the right kind of holding and the readiness within me. And then there are some that are really new. But the title came on the 1st of August, 2020. I remember. I woke out of sleep and just heard it as though it dropped in, the word Griefseed. And I had been asking the question, more family, Iman, welcome. This is the family corner. Yeah, and so just the word landed, but I had already been asking the question, what to do with all this, the weight of all this writing that is sitting in my body that hasn't yet found its way out. I've published a lot. I had things individually and collectively published, but I had bodies of work that hadn't seen the light of day, and I was feeling ill with that. I was feeling, I was carrying a lot. So I had begun to at least collate the work into a huge body of work, which I thought was called Dreams and Debris. And then when I wanted to throw those 350 pages at a publisher, I thought, now let me split that a bit. So it became 2 different manuscripts. And Griefseed eventually was only 20 pages, but it felt so potent. And it felt like the answer, or at least my first response to the gift of this title that I woke up with on that evening and morning, whatever time of day it was.
Those are very interesting beginnings. So anybody who knows Malika's Invisible Earthquake might be wondering, okay, Invisible Earthquake is a poem about grief, a very specific person. It's about a very specific person. And so the question might be, which is the question I had, so just how different is Griefseed from Invisible Earthquake, besides the fact that you were journaling the grief, and then this book becomes Griefseed? How would you talk about the main differences between the two books?
They are in the landscape of my life and my story and in my cellular memory, but they are worlds apart. Griefseed is like the mustard seed that just blew up, grew up, and has branches that are collaborative and expansive, way beyond the very intimate and specific loss. I play around that word of loss because my daughter, Iman Bongiwe, who was stillborn on the 3rd of January 2003 at 3:25 a.m., is not lost. Even at the Cape Town launch of this book, one of the contributors said, why don't you dedicate it to, he threw her name into the room. That wasn't easy to receive in a bookstore in a mall, but it was a gift, because what it told me was that the work of Invisible Earthquake, A Mother's Journal Through Stillbirth, published in 2009, has been doing its work in the world. I know it's done it for me, but just knowing that her name is remembered and that her namesake is in this room creates the most incredible, or your namesake, however that works, is a most extraordinary sense of nothing and no one being lost, but the kind of spiraling nature of time and ways of remembering. And I always hyphenate that word. You might even see it tattooed on my body. And we'll talk about that it's a long story. But that was my solo diary. That was my how to breathe daily through what I was experiencing as a life rupture that has changed me irrevocably. I am not who I was before. I look like it, maybe I sound like it to some. But even when I meet people, I think, was that before or after her? It's a rewiring of your brain. It's that kind of intimate, deep rupture that changes a lot, your perspective, your sense of time. So it was my diary. It's not the whole diary that got published. It did eventually, after 6 years of me just finding my way through and breathing and birthing her brother, Kwezi Michio, who is now here in the world, is 21, and her 2 brothers before. But that was literally my very personal diary. This began as a kind of harvest process of knowing how transformative creative writing or any form of creative expression has been for me, that it's been therapeutic, that it's been life-saving, that I've seen it work in my applied arts in ways that I'm learning a lot about with every year that I do it. And yeah, so with Griefseed, I went back. We were before COVID, but also I was dealing with, in our family tree, different kinds of anticipatory grief, personal loss and trauma through divorce, stuff that I was dealing with my children, a whole range of things. House upheaval, things that were happening in the world, all landing in the soil of my body over time. And I was asking during that period, how can I be useful now? How do you write about all of this collectively? How can I be of service? What kind of instrument am I now? That's different from what I've been doing before. How am I now being honed to continue to do this work, but in a way that best serves this time? And for me, that was just clearly about grief, clearly about the regenerative nature of it that I wanted to make noise about, because the language of loss is very limiting in terms of daring to talk about the breadth and complexity of grief. And I thought I was done when I wrote what I wanted to say in the book. And then I heard a kind of laughter somewhere around here going, ha ha, this one. Yo, she thinks she's done. And I was in a deep listening practice. I went into a 9-month retreat and I was in month 6 and I thought I was done. And I had that response. So the first thing I knew what I wanted was images to breathe into the book, not to embroider it, not to interpret the words, not to just complement visually, but a visual language that gave breathing space between the texts, because a book that has every single chapter about a different kind of grief needs some kind of digestion or breathing space in between. So I invited Coral Bijou to share some images, and those began to meet the text. And then I had been saying I want to share this offering, yes, in book spaces, but in small, intimate circles. I wanted to catalyze conversations around grief, just sharing our stories, just recognizing that we all carry and come from, we can't escape the grief that is within us. So I invited 12 people, 2 of which are in this room, my sister Iman Rapeti and Tobani Kambela. And obviously, Kosi has written the foreword, but it's a collective offering. There are 12 voices from across the country and then a few in the States who in very different ways responded to what I had made. And the wisdom of the publisher was telling me, don't put them at the back like 12 endorsements, because it's a lot. See if you can find a way to weave them into the script. And that was a catalytic part. That changed everything. I am learning what this book now is, still. Yeah. Long story.
It's interesting because the next question was going to be about the images that you have in the book, because I kept looking at them and then reading the poems and trying to make sense. And I thought, okay, you'll be talking to her, ask her, you know. So I'm curious about how you chose those images. And now you've said that you wanted them to serve as a breather, if you like, so that the poems can breathe. But surely there was something more than that. Why would you choose one that shows the ground that's got some, that's like looks like it's ready to be a river, you know, to birth a river? Why would you choose one that has a little moon up there in the sky? So maybe you could give an example or two that are specific, so that people like me who are not very visually intelligent can come out of here with some connections.
So Coral Bijou is a Durban-rooted, same as me, ancestrally from Durban, visual and land artist. She has been making huge bodies of work, all kinds of installations using recycled material, site-specific work over decades. I have worked with her on two major projects, one called Dreams as Revolution, where she used recycled material and worked with nature in collaboration, physically with nature, letting nature grow in and over the sculptures that she made. So it was a kind of evolutionary exhibition. When that exhibition moved to the South African National Gallery, it was tough for them to let her bring all of that inside. She messed with the idea of what's inside and outside. It was powerful. And also the idea of living art, Khokho's included, our kin, you know. And the next body of work that while I was working on the text of Griefseed, she was working in Richmond, in the Karoo, on a body of work called Silence as a Room, 1 of 5. I was curious about it, but I was just blown away by the imagery. Look her up, it's Coral for Art. And I witnessed her carving into the earth, but slowly. I subsequently learned I was birthing this work over 3 years and she was birthing that work over 3 years. We hadn't really figured that timeline yet. But I just loved her images. My book is full of water. I'm a whale, if you haven't noticed. Well, I was in my past life. But the relationship with water is something most people know about me. She was about the land and the kind of apparent absence of water, the sense of drought and this red earth and the idea of earth as body. So I said, please, you're the one. I know it's you. So that was the first invitation to collaborate around what I had written and say, and I need another language in here. I really thrive off collaboration with people who use film, dance, visual art, because it's not my primary language. And what speaks beyond words is very appealing to me. And so those images initially were all just the red earth stuff from Richmond. And then she kept saying to me, I have a feeling that there's so much about regeneration that is vivid in your writing. I would like to offer some images from other works, like Dreams as Revolution, which was a lot more green, visually green, and water came into it. She just found those resonances in the text. So that's how the selection of those images happened. We both did a lot of listening. We had a Zoom session in which she was scrolling all over about, no, I think it should go here, we should put it there. You know, so that was a really collaborative process. But it changed. It also changed as the book took another cycle of shaping with 12 more voices coming in. The resonances are magical. How those images, at least for me, found connection with things people had written. Someone who's never seen her art, someone who didn't speak to me about where their work would be in the book, and yet, if we get quiet enough, I think we will read them. Children read pictures before they read words. So I don't think it's ideas about how images are digested that maybe say, I don't have that skill. But I think we do. Something in us answers to color, to light, and her work is a lot about that.
Okay. And then you have your respondents. And we have 2 of them in the room. I will be inviting them to speak soon. So the idea of getting respondents to your poetry was fascinating for me. And when you sent me the manuscripts, they were all at the back still. And I actually love how they are part of the whole thing now. And it's been very beautifully curated. So I suppose the question I want to ask is, what made the need to have respondents so important, crucial, significant, whatever the word? that you had to get so many people?
So it's a bit of kind of looping back to that story of the sense of, I think I'm done. So in my production management timeline, I'm ready to hand this over to a publisher. I'm ready to move to the next step, hand it over, and have this laughter of what I consider my spirit guides, my ancestors, who I was in conversation with throughout this work. And I had been saying, I want to do these small circles, and what I was hearing was, put them in the book. So in my mind, circles of about 12 to 15 people was where I first thought the most impactful conversations could happen, not in large groups, not just as a product that travels without a context. I feel like it can do that, and it can be something else as a catalyst for those conversations. So initially I thought there were 10, and then I realized there were 12, and so I just started knocking, and every single person said yes. Every person said this feels like a gift or an honor, and they took their time. And the last person, one of the last people that answered was Barbara Boswell, and hers felt like, no, this is definitely those back cover blurbs. So that's how that happened. And the number fell together as 12 in the book. And it really wasn't about, literally in the briefing, I said, please don't write a praise poem for Malika. Please don't write an endorsement. We are collaborating on this so that we can reveal multiple applications of the work. It's not only poetry. It's like nothing I've ever done before, and it's also a lot of what I've done before. I am learning about how this book, or the work that's in this bag of seeds, that a single piece around a single theme could lead to an entire curriculum that I want to do, workshops, conversations, installations, collaborations. And I'm not amping up that it's my powerful work. I'm just saying that everything I'm learning, I'm in school for life about grief. It has shaped and schooled me. It needs time. It needs listening. It needs going slow. So digesting this small book is like taking the bag of seeds and trying to gulp them all down at once. So it's a joy I think of the joy of giving it to people with all the voices in it and all the potential conversations and Coral's amazing artwork, which goes beyond words and doesn't need to be analyzed too much, but to allow to land so that it can grow. Tentacles, mycelial connections, ways in which Invisible Earthquake has traveled. And it was a book I didn't curate. It was a book that I knew I didn't have to beg a publisher to do. The right one would say, I'm the one for this. I want to do this with you. Because it's healing work, it's medicine work, and it's courageous, I think, at some level to go where nobody wants to go. Not me, but the work, those subjects that nobody wants to talk about. And we are ready. COVID prepared us. Grief is mainstream. It's even commercial conversation. Everybody's inbox is open now, full of different opportunities to address and deal with your grief or trauma. Isn't it so? That wasn't so long ago that wasn't popular. So it feels like a ripening and a readiness.
Okay, one of the poems that gave me a lot of joy is Gardening with Granny.
Yebo!
Can you please read that?
Aww. And the two daughters of my grandmother, Margaret Myra Conning, are sitting here. The eldest daughter, my Aunt Grace, and the youngest daughter, Aunt Marlene. That's really special, thank you. Can you tell me what page it's on?
Page 75.
Oh, my epidemiologist sister would know the number.
70?
70.
Or 75?
Yes. Gardening with Granny. My gradually aging hands tug at delicate, crisp, dead leaves, clinging to the still green stem of the potted creeper in the corner of my carport. I cannot tell if it's the bent back stance or the way I mutter to myself, tossing away the brown fronds and cobwebs clasping the assortment of rocks and shells on the surrounding bricks and blue ceramic tiles, or the confident speed with which I separate the dead from the living, unafraid of meeting unexpected insects, getting my hands muddy, spending this precious time focused on the task instead of seemingly more pressing matters waiting at my desk. And perhaps it's all of these things. And finally, the involuntary humming, spiraling up from my chest, which reminds me viscerally of my grandmother, nearly 6 years gone, her unforgettable, unwieldy garden, the evocative, heartfelt gospel songs she wove into her weeding and seeding, her blanket of green wrapped around the house. And the song was, I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, etc.
We're listening. So I'd like to invite the respondents because we're in the conversation. Tobani, I'll start with you because she needs to take this in. She arrived late. I couldn't warn her before we started. To just reflect on what it meant to be invited to do this, what you thought about, why you wrote what you ended up writing, whatever you'd like to reflect on. You speak from here so that everybody can hear you.
Take this one from me, brother. You're good.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So I honestly was not expecting to speak. I was literally told 2 minutes before this started. So this is very intimidating. My name is Tobani. I'm a professor at the University of Johannesburg, but I'm also a student of Malika's work, whose work I've been immersed in for a number of years. So given the short, limited notice, I thought of 3 things that I wanted to share. So I went to 3 articles I've written about Malika's work, and I'll reflect shortly on those. So article number 1 is called Breathing Ourselves Back to Life, Sorrow, Pain, and Healing in Malika Ndlovu's Poetry. So trained in medical anthropology, I'm always interested, not just in issues of all the illness and disease in society, but also interested in issues of how do we heal. And it was important to me as a medical anthropologist to not engage Malika's work as a poet, but actually in this article, I actually argued that she's an ethnographer of life. So the ways in which we take seriously medical anthropologists, clinical psychologists, medical doctors, the poetry should also be read in that sense. Article number 2 is starts with a quote from one of her poems. It's called This Haunting Dance of Grief. Living words, remembering, so you would know how she spells it if you've read her work, and the blissful. Okay, there's a typo. Sorry. So this haunting dance, living words, remembering, and the blissfulness of being in Malika Ndlovu's poetry. So this article actually expands on the first one, but is really focused more specifically on the themes of grief. I think everyone who's here knows that this is a theme that occurs a lot in her work, but there's also a lot of boldness as well, and a refusal, as you would see in the essay that I wrote for the collection, a refusal to succumb to the grief. So there's always that refusal. And then the last one, I was so happy that you referred to this, is also joy in her work. I think a lot of the time we focus on issues of, the grief and all of those, but there's so much joy. And actually my favorite collection is Womb to World. And when you laugh there's just like this, boundless laughter that also you can't help but feel happy as well. So just to close without being too explained, I wanted to read from one of those articles forthcoming. So please do read it when it's out. So I was not warned, so I will have to edit some things. So it's written for a journal. So some things I'll have to edit out. But anyways, so I will start from here. So through So I study Malika Ndlovu through medical, anthropological, and ethnomedical lenses on 3 themes in Ndlovu's work: sorrow, pain, and healing. As Ndlovu states in her part, as Ndlovu states, okay, I don't have my glasses. As Ndlovu states, her part of biographical or autoethnographic poetry, as I argue, reflects various states of pain, conflict, as well as moments of awe and healing in her life and the social political worlds around her. Writing from the self, this is from a quote from one of her poems. Through Ndlovu's poetry, we experience art as a life practice in the midst of our inspiring and equally challenging events that threaten to splinter our souls sometimes. Okay. Exploring themes of coloniality, intergenerational trauma, displacement, and dismemberment, alongside concerns with breathing, survival, and healing, Ndlovu's work explores how we can find beauty in the broken. Another quote from one of her poems. Living in a contested, former colonized, and post-apartheid settler society, Ndlovu makes use of breathing variously in her work as a form of coming back to life, from the wounds and wounding experiences of the past and present-day South Africa. In her work, we can observe through Ndlovu the suffering and the healing poet all at once. In the context of her sorrows and pain, we observe through Ndlovu's words and social cultural context to healing. Consequently, a significant concern of her poetry is the pursuit of wholeness and holism through the use of words to heal the chasms that face her as an artist, as well as the country that she resides in. Ultimately, in all these publications, I argue that Ndlovu's poetry contributes to confronting what it means to be terrorized, wounded, and former colonized in present-day South Africa, as well as how we live, love, and heal in contemporary South Africa as the country continues to grapple with unresolved historical traumas, hierarchies of exclusion, and deep-seated inequalities. So I'm so proud of you for this collection. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. It's Kobani's birthday today. Can we just say, la la?
How does that feel?
Ooh.
3 articles going into journals on your work. I mean, this is over and above the response that's in the book. How does it feel?
I am also learning how to receive. Chronic givers are in receiving school, so it feels good. It feels good for the ways in which it can amplify the work, if it opens ways for it to travel, if it serves the bringing it into the spaces where it's needed, then that's amazing, brother, and you are so prolific. And I haven't heard any of these articles, so that's my first time. And a huge gift to receive in this moment. And Kosi, you know a lot about that kind of lens. Makhosazana's work does a lot to document and ensure that historical erasure doesn't happen in terms of what Black women writers have been doing for decades in this country, whatever innovations they have been, but not only their work, it's how they've done their work that she has documented so powerfully. And I'm really honored to be also in the collection, Our Words, Our Worlds, Black South African Women Poets, 2008 to 2018. So this collaborative, communal way of birthing things is natural, actually. The singular I is a delusion. And so I'm really, it's beautiful to receive. Thank you, brother.
Okay. Something else to receive from Iman Rapeti.
Yes. It's okay with everyone. I'm going to sit, if that's all right. And my only hesitation about speaking and being surprised about speaking is that my entire being is made of membrane, and the slightest prick could render me liquid, because I'm dealing with a series of griefs myself. But it's important, whether it's ugly or pretty, to honor people that you've had the privilege of journeying with for a large portion of our lives, really. I think we met as students back in the tumultuous, before her brother found me, and that's the subject of another book, which is published, and I think it's available here. Hi. So I think, just to be safe, I'll just read a portion of what I had written and contributed to your book, but also to say that my learning of you and my study of you has been through life itself, and that is something unique and special and beautiful through its many iterations, and I'm grateful, and I am absolutely enthralled to see this. I haven't seen it in hard copy yet, so it's going to be, when I can, I will. I think this is the one, and Timalin has given it to me. Okay. And I borrowed these glasses, so pardon me. It's very hard to accept our aging. But a part of what I've written is, I'll put my reading voice on, this book is one of the rarest kind, a work in worship towards facing the unflinching truth of the sites of pain we must visit in ourselves, the necessary symbolic tombstone washing that wills us to peel away the masks of denial and to go to the places deeply buried to find freedom, not fear. It is not a read, it is an experience. To journey with Malika through the intimacies of the events that she narrates is like setting words to music. What unfolds will reanimate your own painful and stretching periods through grief and loss. For me, in part, it is a collision between some of her life experiences and mine. As one sister-in-law's, but sisters first, it is a reading I hesitated to embark upon for those reasons. You have to prepare to open the pages and encounter viscerally how words can pull you like threads into stories that awaken and twin with the old and deadly sleeping giants of your own pains. And this is what happened. While I'm drunk in every word, I'm not done reading because I'm not done facing and feeling. And it was a gift to write that to you and a gift to be here. I don't mean to alter the trajectory, but I also think that being natural and being real around the themes that you raise in your book are not spaces that are readily available, and it's important that they are, and that, as you said, grief is mainstreamed. So thank you and bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for being real as you read that. One of the things I was thinking about as I was preparing for this was, I don't know why my head phrased the question like this, but I remember thinking, how many people will be in the room experiencing recent grief? So there'll be time for us to talk about in the general conversation time, but thank you for being willing to do that. So Malika, can I invite you to read the poem on page 66, Remembering Iman?
January 3rd, 2012. Remembering Iman. Heart suspended in memory waters, a daughter's umbilical anchoring, the sudden rupture then floating away. For a father, a mother almost cried out, silence is sufficient. Now, the best way. Fresh white paint on grey bricks, sacred herbs, rainbow halo of roses, placed by a little brother's hand. For him, a first-time graveyard ritual. He's now old enough to understand. If not for the sand on our shoes, the telltale stains on our clothes, the 9-year-old clouds in our eyes, you may miss the magnitude of this day, this event, this precious physical evidence.
So I'd like to now move to us. Invite you to comment, ask questions, engage, and share whatever you feel invited to share around this theme of grief. Hand number 1.
I have a roving mic here.
Okay, let's take your hand because it's on its own right now.
Sister, thank you so much for this wonderful gift. I know you love water. I know you love the ocean and everything liquid. So if there was water poured upon a grief seed, what might grow?
Are you ready to respond, or shall we take another hand?
That I feel we can weave, but definitely Prof. Make next. Yes.
Just breaking the silence, please. I one point said that a little learning is a dangerous thing, and I'm treading on that dangerous route because I only read 2 poems, one at random, and then I listened to you reading, but a lot of things strike me. But the last words of the poem that you read, I didn't open my book because I wanted to hear a voice uttering, the experience, describe this event. But in the poem that I read at random, and the one that you read, the first one that Mama Zama asked you to read, I think that we tend to think that pain is either in the mind or in the heart, metaphorically, figuratively. But what I thought you were doing in the first poem that I read and the one that you read is that you dismember first the different parts of the body in the way that remembers them. In that I learned in that brief moment that I read this poem that pain does not dwell in the heart or in the mind. It dwells in every part of the body. And that's how you do it, describing what every part of the body does in response to pain, in either resisting or dealing with it, or kind of therapying that pain. That's what I sensed. And even that poem, there was a coincidence that the physiological images in this poem and the one that you read were more or less the same. And what it teaches me that pain is felt from here to down to our souls, but not only in the heart, but in every part of the body that you dismember and remember. Pardon my ignorance, just 2 poems that I've read. Thanks.
So I just want to hold those 2 beads. Thank you so much. Prof. Make, I think you've actually, you've resounded with what Tobani started with, which is really disturbing this imposed idea. I'm avoiding words like colonial and Western. I just find it divisive. We have other vocabularies to speak to those things. But the idea of how the body is an archive of our experiences is something I physically, viscerally felt myself. This is the muti that I was using for myself to keep myself afloat, to keep myself out of mental health institutions, to deal with the sense of confusion around belonging at different phases in my life, to be with overwhelming grief. And I recognized how that expunging through some form of creative expression was changing my state of mind, but also my physical body, a sense of lightness or energy returning, a change in my breath, changes in my skin, all kinds of physiological responses to the fact that I found ways to ventilate. Writing has always been a breathing for me since I was really young. And I want to be, I've been championing healing through creative expression for the longest time. So yes, it lives in our whole bodies, and that's also why my collaboration with medical anthropologists or being in clinical settings or in palliative care is always about recognizing what the body is saying. Our bodies speak very loudly and clearly. We are not listening necessarily as well, and we are not schooled, or we need to do some unschooling in order to be able to, I'm learning this. So happy to share that we are both in school. And then the idea of water. We are bodies of water. We're responding to the moon. We're responding through menstrual cycles. Birthing is obviously a lot about water. The quality of tears and the salt water, the kinds of water that's in the womb, and the kind of, there's also pleasure somewhere in this book because there's an acute aliveness that comes in some of those devastating moments, an awareness of the hairs on your skin standing up with a change of temperature, your eyes paying attention like a child with fresh lenses to how long it takes a snail or an ant to go from there to there, or watching a spider do its web, or watching a flower do this incredible sculptural form of dance in its dying. And there's a beauty in that that's inescapable to me and that has rescued me. And those are very physical, doable, accessible things. So the idea of how we can respond to grief in collective, accessible ways, not necessarily the suppression of a pill or medication or feeling like you need to speak. Speaking is not everybody's way. And often we are at a loss it's at a loss for words in this context. And silence is a huge way to navigate. And I'm not telling you things you don't know. I'm feeling the resonance in this space because we do have these knowings. It's just different ways of owning it. And I am, as I said, I feel like I'm being profoundly schooled, somewhere between aging and my son's out of the nest and living immersed on the south coast of KZN, where it's so loud in terms of those kind of lessons daily. I wanted to, for a long time, I really wanted to call this book Griefseed and Awe. Because joy and awe, there is actually a couple of scientific podcasts around this concept of awe and the biological effects around joy and de-stressing that is connected to grief. There's something about that transmutation that creates a pocket or a breathing space or a perspective that leaves you, if not numb, but with a sense of awe in that stillness or in that gravity or being frozen or just not wanting to move or to breathe. We have a little portal of possibility that I haven't heard enough about. And it's weird, but I'm excited about that. I feel useful in those conversations. I feel in some ways born to do it.
Wow. Okay, there's a hand out there. 1, 2. Is this moving up? No. Okay. Those two.
Malika, good evening, and thank you for the gift. I'm not going to talk about the personal. It's too much right now. But there's two things. The one is about the extinction of our species, and it is happening in relation to climate change and so on. And as an activist, I sometimes I grieve around that. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on that. The other is, of course, the vast sort of biological life beyond us. It's anonymous to us. It's there. It's also dying with us. The insect apocalypse, all the wildlife we've had in the 20th century, half of it is wiped out and so on. So any thoughts on how that kind of grief also?
So I'm a fan of two particular people. One is Bayo Akomolafe, who really flips the script on the notion of some kind of apocalypse or ending. He opens the cracks in the ways that we conventionally understand what's happening, and he's really not into the idea that we are in a crisis. So I find that he literally has birthed vocabularies around the things that we are feeling quite terrified, rightfully so. We are dealing with profound multiple levels of change, of growth, of transformation, of what we feel as loss. It's not about rationalizing it or even Isingis as the language. It's a collective mutation as a species. And I love the way that he dips into Yoruba mythology and philosophy that also, is an indigenous way of understanding time and space, etc. Then there's Adrienne Marie Brown, who really is so beautifully courageous in the way that she, even in the worst times in planet America, is able to get online and articulate ways that we can hold each other, ways that our activism needs to transmute as well, remain in the state of adaptation. And a lot of eco-poets, if we can even brand them that, are saying, decenter the human. We are really arrogant as a species, thinking we need to save the planet. I mean, the planet has been here, Gaia has been here before us, and before and before and before. And this evolution, as much as we've made our contribution to the mess up and to the tragedy of how we are even relating to each other, as a species, we have a lot to learn from the way other species are adapting our kin. More than human is the phrasing that people often use, but there's so much we can learn. I have my 21-year-old son, Kwezi Michio, is fascinated by ethology, or the wisdom and behavior of animals. He wants to dedicate his life to being schooled by animals, wild animals, animals in the wild. And I'm so happy that he's awake to that. I'm so happy because I didn't have to push him to do that. There are young people who are standing in the front line around these climate change crises, and they're making a lot of noise. They're literally throwing their bodies into unsafe spaces to say, can we just pay attention to how our accelerated efforts to respond are actually secondary harm or complicating the process that is actually evolutionary? How else can we look at this? And the other last thing I want to think about is just the idea that we think we're championing. There's an entire language around activism that I think I've always been kind of, because even it was projected onto arts. It was like, you had to be protest art or, activist, you are artivist. And yes, but let us define what that is. Let's make sure it doesn't stay fixed, because the only constant is change. The delusion that we are living in nice, fixed, safe spaces is a story we are obviously being clapped on the head if we don't understand. This is an alive story, and it's a story that includes everyone. And it cannot be contained in one language, one country, one government, one rescue mission or peace body. We've learned even how so-called interventions around peace building have been absolutely the opposite. So we have a lot of work to do for sure, but I am definitely one of those who's holding that beacon that's not about hope only. It's really about evidence. Nature has told us many times COVID helped us get out of the way, and we saw swans in the water, populations of butterflies, and in migration, other species that we hadn't seen in a long time emerging. There are ancient ones who are coming into the waters where our ships and our oil rigs have taken a side seat. All of that is happening when we get out of the way and become more listeners than drivers of the project. And it's a profoundly humbling and terrifying thing, but it feels more like the right direction than this. Thank you.
So there was a hand right at the back there.
Yeah,
Is there another
sorry.
one?
I'm taking you backwards. That was a nice question. A little bit personal, because I didn't even know you are the author. And somebody just sent me the book launch, and I thought, grief. Maybe I'll learn something. So a little bit personal. But I've been one to lock up grief and pack it away and move on. Because why dwell on grief? Why, it has happened. And I thought, wow, maybe somewhere I'm going to listen to somebody who shares her personal journey and may say, read page 75 or whatever Kosi has been doing with you, and just give me a hint of what the book can help to either ignore it or not ignore it. So I don't even know what's in the book. That's how inquisitive I am. But the title itself was very attractive. So my question is, where in the book can I go without going to page 1? To just connect with you.
Oh, I love that question. I'm going to amplify that. Where can I go in the book without going to page 1? Yes. Everything I've been saying about this being a bag of seeds, about indigenous time, maybe I didn't articulate it this way, but colonial time is linear. It wants to amputate the past from the present. It doesn't connect ancient future, all of that. So this spiraling nature of time is what I am immersed in. And it helps a lot. That's nature's way. That's seasonal. That's cyclical. That's cosmic. It's natural. It's in our bodies, even in the ways that our cells repair themselves and are regenerative constantly. In the book, you could drop in anywhere, inshallah, and find something. And I really hope that I keep saying it's a book, but it's not a book. I had to find a tangible way to consolidate some of the things I've been learning that I want to share and make it digestible. I didn't have to do effort with that. I think poetry helps that. I think the aesthetic that comes from the collaboration, the fact that it's not just Malika, that's a range of other voices, that there's a gender spectrum, and age, race, just messing with all these divides, or at least disturbing them, so that anybody could find this book. It needs translation probably at some levels. But sister, there are chapters in the book about the very, I'm not sure if the chapter is called suffocation but I didn't want this to be a kind of prescription book. I really feel that things that even don't seem to be talking about it can find their way into the soil of whatever it is you're experiencing. Grief is way more complex than our intellect can narrow down into the things of like the 5 stages or etc. With great respect to Kubler-Ross and everybody else who's been doing much work, and there are so many people talking now online about grief and trauma, and birthing works that speak to it, but it's all each of us finding our own ways. Essentially, it's story, it's human story, and so the piece that I think is in here is about both the times of the very thing we might be seeking is what we're avoiding. So just being able to just sit at the door where those things have been in the closet. You don't have to go in and sort it out. Fixing is part of the mentality around a clinical response that's secondary harm. Being with your grief, sitting with the discomfort of even naming, that's the door. And there's a lot in there. That's huge. That's huge. A lot of people are literally running for life from even the acknowledgement that there's a door. So ways in which we can be kinder to ourselves in that process and also understand the unschooling. We have been deeply schooled to think. We do all the funeral rituals, time passes, and now you're done, right? You've got 3 other children. Why are you mourning this one 22 years later? As if we are replaceable. And with womb loss, that levels of invisibility silences. There is so much grief around womb loss in the world, the entire spectrum, for example. And so even parental loss, men grappling with how to express their feelings around the loss of a son, because of course patriarchal schooling or certain kinds of masculinity or cultural norms oppress that, say that's not appropriate, not allowed, and where can I go? Where I don't also have to lie on a couch or take a pill. I'm not dissing those things, I'm just texturing the frame of what we know as familiar. And I think asking questions is also the beautiful thing. I think about it as soil, and the question is the potent thing. That's the key. How can I? Where do I? Why do I? This is like the spade. Just digging there and then let it go. Don't let the grief do its work and start telling you with your whole body. Go slowly. Okay, there's a list in here which says make a list. There's a piece that says make a list, name all the sites, go back as far as you want. And it is a gardening exercise. I think I've shaped it that way. Make a list of all the people you want to blame and shame who wounded you, the ruptures in your life, in that river of life story. Name them. Naming is a very powerful beginning. And so name and pause, like everything in nature does. It's this. You can't do one without the other. The ocean is doing it, the giving and the receiving. And just, if we go into all the, Chinese medicine, the qi story about, blockage of energy, it has to be both. It has to be both. So you don't have to also do it all your own work. The grief does its work on you. It's already doing its work. When we're keeping it in the closet, good luck thinking you're gonna, that shows up in the body, in illness, in our relationships, in our incapacitation at work, in our joy not being accessible. And that's a part of aliveness that we can have, no matter how much I'm preaching.
And we have run out of time. So a good way to end a book launch on poetry is to read a poem. And this time I'm going to ask you to read whatever poem you feel you'd like to close with.
Thank you. So some of the pieces are prose, some are poems, some are my reflections in a kind of analytical way. This one is early on in the book and it's called Letting. Let the wound weep. Mess with your sleep. Make you forget to call or eat. Want to curl up, hide from the light, not your tongue, your mind chattering, a scratched record through the night. Letting is never easy, but somehow part of the coming through. Even when you cannot see, something vital is being retrieved. Let the wound weep for its own coming into being, for all the time it took for you to truly look at it, naked and raw once more. Let the wound weep, rage, howl, sob, hear its call in solitude or in crowds. Listen for when and how to answer, to play, stay shallow, dive, or sink deep. Let the wound weep. Breathe. Go slowly. Healing is a dawning, can feel like losing, seem like burning, drowning or dying. Only the wound knows how many days or ways. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much for this gift, Malika. And thank you, Love Books.
And thank you,
for
Kosi
offering the space. I will now hand over.